I'm dedicating the story to Tony Marr. When you set about raising a child, one of the most important things you have to do is make sure they don't get into trouble, like trouble with the law. Because if they get a record, it's going to make their life all the more difficult. And when I was growing up, well, there weren't any child psychologists. Dr. Spock was just writing his first book. But somehow, through the grapevine or other, parents figured out to use the S&P method to bring up children. That was the strictness and punishment method. And that's what my mother used on me. But I was raising kids in the 80s and the 90s, and now there was a whole lot of child psychologists, and they said the S&P method was no good. They said, if you try to be really, really strict with your child and don't let them do anything, they're going to try all the harder to get into mischief. And when they do and you punish them, they're going to hate you forever. And I knew this was true, because I did get into mischief, and I did get into punishment, and I did harbor some negative feelings toward my mother. So I didn't want to do that. So the latest and the greatest methods of raising children in the 80s and the 90s was the trust and responsibility method. It was called the TR method. And that meant that you told your child that you trusted them to take the responsibility to keep themselves out of trouble. You knew that they could do that, and they didn't want to disappoint you. So they wouldn't get into trouble, and they would love you forever. So when my oldest, Miss Jody, was going off to high school, I sat her down and I explained this to her. I trust you to take the responsibility to keep yourself out of trouble. I'm not going to be real strict. I'm not going to punish everything. I'm trusting you. And I'll give you this little help. If you ever find yourself anywhere where something is going on that you think is wrong or dangerous or illegal, pick up the phone, call me. I'll be there in a flash, no questions asked. You won't even get punished because you took the responsibility of getting yourself out of a bad situation. Now, she'll deny it, but we had this conversation more than once. So, the beginning of 10th grade, she comes home and she tells me that she's invited to a sleepover at Mary Frances Deacon's house. There'll be 6 girls on a Friday night. I didn't even think anything at the time because I knew Mary Frances Deacon. She went to grade school with Jody, and she was what we would say socially backward. Part of it was her appearance. She looked like a character from Snoopy with the red fuzzy hair and freckles and glasses and barrettes in her hair. But I think part of the reason she was socially backwards is because her parents were still practicing the S&P method, and they never let her go anywhere. So I had no qualms about letting Jody go over to Mary Frances Deacon's for a sleepover, because with Mr. and Mrs. Deacon in charge, she was lucky if she got caffeine, let alone alcohol. Well, I dropped her off and I went home and had a good night's sleep. The next morning I pull up at 10 o'clock and Jody comes out to the car and she's all excited. She has to tell me, guess what, Mom? Guess what happened? What? She said, 60 kids showed up at Mary Frances Deacon's house last night. 60. Yeah, but we didn't let them all in. We let only some in, but the rest of them were out in the backyard and they were running around and noisy, and the neighbors, well, they called the police. And some of the kids took off, and they were running through the yards, and they ran through the chief of police's yard, and he arrested them for trespassing. I said, stop. Is that right? Wait. You told me 6 girls were coming to this party. How did it get to 60? She said, well, Mary Frances has an older sister, which I didn't know. And she was a senior, and she thought that she could control a party. So most of these kids who showed up were seniors. And I said, well, what about Mr. and Mrs. Deegan? She said, oh, they weren't there for the weekend. And there was a grandmother, but she was in the back room and she never came out. She said, you know, Mom, the girls I went with, Emily and Liv and Andrea and Megan, they got scared and they all ran down the street and stayed at Emily's house, but I didn't go with them. So much for, I think it was, I said, if you think that you're in a situation where you think there's trouble, I should have said, if you're in a situation where your mother thinks. Well, her brother's 3 years behind her. And when he turned 16, well, I wasn't that worried because my personal opinion is that boys are easier to bring up than girls. Because they're not all this drama and emotion and stuff. They don't come home crying about somebody said something about their hair, or if they didn't get invited to this party, or this boy looked at them funny. You know, they don't do that. They go out and do stuff. They ride bikes, you know, they build forts. They're always doing something. And this was true about my son. Hung around with a bunch of nice kids, president of the school and everything. And I was almost like jealous of them because they were always having fun together. They're always up to something. And just like today, when all the kids are interested in electronics, back in the, I guess this was the 80s, the newest thing was the video camera. It was about as big as a computer, but you could take home videos with it. Yeah. And we didn't have one, but somebody did. So one day, John's coming down the steps, his arms full of stuffed animals. And I said, those are your sisters, your younger sisters, animals, where are you going? He said, oh, we're making a movie, Mom. We got this video camera, and we're making a horror movie. We're making a revenge of the stuffed animals. All the stuffed animals are going to come back and get even with the kids who were mean to them when they threw them around when they were kids. See what I mean? You know, it's clever, it's creative, you know, they're not drinking, they're out there making a movie. I saw one little clip of this movie, only a couple seconds long, and somebody had a huge teddy bear. One of those teddy bears like your bachelor friend brings you as a new gift for your baby. It's about this high and this wide, and it's just a dust collector, you know. Well, they had one of those teddy bears, and they put it behind the wheel of the car, which happened to be my car, and then they had a kid stand in front of the car like this, like the teddy bear was running over the kid. And then the very next scene, he was flat on the roadway. Again, I thought, wow, you know, what they're out there doing, you know, making a movie. You know, it's a horror movie, but it's not really horror. It's kind of fun. 3 years later, my son went to Syracuse University, and he was going to enroll with the Air Force. He calls me up on the phone. He's there 1 week. He said, Mom, I need you to do something. I said, what? He says, go up to my room. Under my bed, there's a shoebox. And inside the shoebox are some letters. Don't read them. All right. And in that shoebox, there's also a little wicker box. Open it up. There's a piece of paper in there that I need you to mail to me. And I said, look, very difficult to mail you this piece of paper without seeing what's on it, so you better come clean. He said, well, when I was making that movie, I was riding on the top of the car, and the car was moving, and the policeman saw us, and he gave me a ticket for dangerous driving, or I don't know what the ticket was for, but he got a ticket for riding on the top of a car while it was moving. But Mom, I took responsibility. I paid the ticket and never told you. Yeah, I was done with that T&R method. That was it. Number 3 came along. She was 6 years behind her son, my son. And she was kind of an easy child because she played 3 sports. And totally, sports are the best thing. They're either at practice, or they're at a game, or they're doing their homework. They don't have no time for them, no shenanigans. So that's pretty much how it was until the summer. And she came home one day and she said, Mom, Sean's parents have a house down the shore. And she said that for the weekend he could invite a bunch of people to go down and stay at the shore for the weekend. Mom, can I go? Can I go? I'm a lot older and smarter now. I called up Sean's mother and said, what's the deal? And she said, yes, I told my son he can invite a couple of people down, and I will be there, and there'll be no hanky-panky, and there'll be no alcohol, and don't worry. I said, yes, Jennifer, you can go. 2 days before they were supposed to leave, she comes home, she goes, Mom, Sean invited so many kids that we can't all fit in Mrs. whatever her name, car. We need another car. We need somebody else to drive to the shore. Can I drive to the shore? This is a girl who's been driving for 9 months. And the shore, my husband tells me, is like from here to the mountains. I can't think, it starts with a G.
Gatlinburg.
Gatlinburg. With one major difference. You have to go through Philadelphia to get there. Philadelphia, if you've ever been there, you know what I'm talking about. There's the Schuylkill Expressway, which we call the Shorekill Expressway. 5 lanes either way. I said, Jen, and she said, Mom, you know, I won't be able to go. I never get to do anything. There's a whole bunch of kids going, and I don't go. And I talked to her father, and I said, all right, this is what we're going to do. You can go, you can drive, but you get behind Mrs. Sean Brown's car, and you stay behind that car the whole way there. You do not pass, you do not collect any money when you go through the go. You just stay behind her car. And when you get to the shore, you park that car in front of her house, and it doesn't move the whole weekend. Because at the shore, there's lots and lots of traffic. It's not fast traffic, but it's not the cars I worry about so much as the people coming back from the beach with all the towels and buckets and sand, and the little kids running out. She promised she would not move the car. And at the end of the weekend, she would follow Sean's mother home. I got that down. I was going to say swear on the Bible, but that didn't happen. So I worried all the time. And she came home in one piece. The car was in one piece. But she had a story to tell. She, guess what we did, Mom? We went to Atlantic City. I said, wait a minute, you didn't drive to Atlantic City. No. Sean drove the station wagon. I didn't move the car. We went to Atlantic City and we went to Trump Plaza. But you got to be 21 to go there. They serve alcohol. You can't. I know, Mom. We didn't find that out till we got there. She said, and when we got there, we saw the sign that said you couldn't come in unless you were 21. These kids are 16, by the way. And she said, but Chris was a football player. And he had, you know, he was big. He had the best chance of anybody to get in. And he had another thing going for him. He happened to be African American. And the women who were guarding the door were African American. And Chris said he knew he could go over and chat those ladies up and they would let him in, no problem. But he wasn't going alone. Now the other boys in the group, they weren't even shaving yet. Nobody was going to pass 21. And nobody in that group was going to pass 21 except maybe Chris. And he decided that some girl should pretend to be his girlfriend. Guess who volunteered?
Oh boy.
Jen was like 100 pounds soaking wet. And Chris was successful. He walked right up to those women and he chatted them up and they let them right into the casino. And now they're inside. Now they're all worried because there's lots of guards and people inside. And Chris said, well, we're in here now, let's go. We did it, we got in, let's go. And Jen said, oh, I want to try this sheet. I want to try this, you know, I just want to try it. So Chris took a quarter out of his pocket and he gave it to Jen. Jen looked around, found the machine, put the quarter in, pulled the handle and ding, 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 800 quarters started pouring out of the machine. And she said, I didn't know what to do, Mom. I didn't know whether to stay for the money or run like hell. But some lady next to me gave me a bucket. And I collected all the quarters. Now what are we going to do? So she said, Chris decided he'd go up to the window and exchange the 800 quarters. And these children, 16-year-old 10th graders, did not know that 800 quarters was $200. Well, Chris got the $200, two $100 bills, and they dashed out. They left. And they went up to the other kids, and Chris said, look at me, I got $200. Jen said, no, you didn't, you know. He said, well, it was my quarter. She said, I went in there with you, and I did the machine, and I pulled the handle, and I got my $100. And she got it. And so, I was like, I thought I covered everything. I thought I covered it. I made sure there was no drinking, no hanky-panky, a mother in charge. I never dreamed that she would think to drive 30 miles to Atlantic City and go into a casino. Now, how is a parent supposed to know that they're going to do that? I don't know. So what I'm saying is I was very, very fortunate. All three of them managed to grow up without a record. But it was no thanks to me.